and welcome to a very special edition of the Wempire podcast. My name is Rebecca Crockett, and as part of Wempire's month-long series of medical misogyny, I'll be speaking to the people trying their best to end the gender health gap. On this week's podcast, I'll be speaking with Kate Muir, a women's health expert and producer of award-winning documentaries on the menopause and the pill. Her books, Everything You Need to Know About Menopause and Everything You Need to Know About the Pill, are thorough guides into the world of hormones, an area that is often ignored, underfunded and under-researched. Hello Kate, welcome to the Wempire podcast. It is so lovely to have you. For anyone that isn't aware of your work, if you want to just give a quick introduction, that would be great.
Well, I suppose I'm a filmmaker and an author, and I have made a couple of films on the menopause with Davina McCall, which kind of brought the menopause conversation to tipping point in the UK. I've written a book about the menopause called Everything You Need to Know About the Menopause, but we're too afraid to ask. And now I've written a book about the pill called Everything You Need to Know About the Pill. And we also made a documentary, again with Davina, called Pill Revolution. So I suppose I am looking at this on all fronts, and that's my kind of calling at the moment.
Yeah, and what I love about your work in particular is the fact that you don't try and glorify a certain method of contraception. You also don't lean into scaring people either. When you were writing it, was that a hard balance to strike between presenting the facts but also presenting real scary experiences from a lot of different women?
I thought it was so important to present those scary experiences because most of them hadn't been presented before. And in particular, the mental health effects of the pill on women, which could be incredibly long term, 20 years and things like that. And I thought just people hadn't talked about it enough. We were so given the pill is this lovely little package. Here you go, 10 minutes at your doctor, off you go, see you in 20 years' time. And I thought, wow, that is a massive health decision to be made in ignorance. And so at that point, I really, really thought it's hard to balance this book. It will not be balanced because it's actually balancing up what's going on in the outside world, which is that you can get the pill over the counter or, lots of the other things like contraceptive patches without knowing what's in them. And most people go on the pill in our big survey when they're at school. 64% start hormonal contraception at school. How much did I know about hormonal contraception or what was in it then? Nothing whatsoever. So I want people to be informed.
Yeah, yeah. And in terms of sort of the broad range of contraception, I mean, it's not just the pill, it's the patch, the coil. There's so many differences, and then in between that, there's hormonal differences as well. Different hormones are going to give you certain side effects, and or perhaps they might not. For you, what was sort of the biggest difference that you found whenever you were researching it?
The big point is that what's in the pill is synthetic. Those are synthetic hormones. Those are chemicals. They are not copies of your own hormones. They're something else. And very interesting that I came to this from menopause and HRT, hormone replacement therapy. And of course, that has got really good because it's body identical and a copy of your own hormones. So it's rather like topping up. You're not putting something alien in your body. And then when I started looking at the risks of the pill and what was the risky bit of the pill, I realized increasingly it was the same thing that had been risky in the old HRT, which we talked about 20 years ago, and they talked about the breast cancer risk 20 years ago, and that was synthetic progestins, spelt with IN on the end of that word. And they are not natural. They are, made in labs. I mean, so are the other, pills we get, but they are exact copies, molecular copies of our own hormones, and they're made from soy. You ask any 12-year-old, would you like a synthetic chemical to replace your hormones, or would you like a copy of your own hormone made from soy? What would that 12-year-old do? And we are in a world where doctors are giving us the older hormones. And certainly, in menopause, that shouldn't be the case at all because there are alternatives. Increasingly, there will be alternatives in the pill and hormonal contraceptive space, but they're not there yet. And we are not being told the full truth.
Hmm. Yeah, and when you talk about this truth, I mean, you share like a really interesting quote from, I think it's Jashra Kulkarni, about how,
Love her, yes.
yeah, about the hormone. There's not a steel plate between your throat and your brain, stopping hormones from getting up to your brain.
Mm.
And this sort of misconception from doctors. I mean, the party line is there's no link between depression and contraception. It's only low moods, but that is so different from what many women experience. When for you did the ball sort of drop that there is a link between contraception and mental health? I mean, was there a
Well,
moment or yeah.
that happened at home
Hmm.
because it happened with me and my own daughter. My daughter Molly, who's given me permission to tell her story. She was up at Edinburgh University. She was on the pill. Lockdown came. She came back home. She went into a dark room in our basement. And, I thought, oh my God, she's just got really depressed because she's left university. And, a lot of people were miserable in the first lockdown. And she just really didn't want to come up into the kitchen and have meals. She said, I think I'll make the room sad if I come into it. I just don't feel right. And then we were all really worried about her because it was so unlike her. And then about a month later, she popped up in the kitchen, absolutely fine, said she was going out for a run, going to see some friends. And she sort of turned into a different person. I mean, not immediately, but she was clearly, much, much better. And we tried to work out what had happened. And what had happened was her pill prescription had run out from Edinburgh. She hadn't bothered to get it renewed in London, and was just sitting there coming off the pill and suddenly felt so much better. And it was the only circumstance that had changed. We were still sitting in lockdown, but she was no longer putting synthetic hormones into her brain. And that had caused depression. And I felt really stupid. I was delighted when we found this out. And the two of us started researching it together because obviously I'd written a book about the menopause. I knew all about hormones in the head for older women and synthetic and body identical, all that stuff, right? And yet I didn't notice what was going on in my own house because I just thought of the pill as the pill, just kind of one thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then Molly and I together started researching what was going on, and we started researching a documentary. But what she dug up way early was all the Scandinavian work on depression and the pill and hormonal contraception and the coil and all these other hormones that we put into our bodies. And of course, the Scandinavians had been on it in Denmark and Sweden for years because they have amazing databases where they have the databases of all the women in the country. They keep them up to date. They know what they've been on. And one of the things they could immediately track was that within a year of certain young women going on hormonal contraception, they were increasingly going on antidepressants. And it wasn't just people saying, oh, I don't feel right in the pill. You could actually see the prescriptions landing in this huge database. And it looked like young women particularly, who'd gone on contraception, seemed to have between like a 34 to 40% chance of higher chance of going on antidepressants. And of course, when you look at all the stuff in the textbooks here in England and all the sort of official websites, it says there's been not enough randomized controlled trials to show that, the pill can make you more depressed. Of course, nobody's bothered to do big trials. And the trials that were done on older women who were willing to go on the pill, who didn't have any mental health problems beforehand, and they were eliminated. The kind of people who are a bit up and down crazy, like most of us, were eliminated from those trials. So and this is sort of adolescents who are already in a hormonal soup, and then you add the wrong hormone to their collection, and it does just throw them off. It completely can throw them off. And that is the key thing, I think. It's like between about sort of 15, lots of people go on the pill at 14 and 15 for acne, until about 20 something. There's a scary period there when people are growing up and the pill is dumped on them, and that's who they think they are. And so that became the kind of key to what we were going to investigate and ask about.
Yeah, it was actually that Scandinavian research that I found so interesting, and the fact that they have these like massive databases. Like, I'm wondering why can't we have that here? Like, what is stopping us, do you think, from getting there and having that?
I just think our the digitization of our health information is terrible. It's very,
Mm.
very disorganized. Maybe one day someone will get that right, but it was just clear that this was going on. And then I because I'm on Instagram and stuff like that, I just kept meeting people who would send me their story and say, "Can I talk to you about what happened to me?" And I think one of the women I met, had gone on the pill at 15 or whatever it was for acne, and had, after going on it, suddenly couldn't go to school, drew away from school, didn't do her GCSEs, became homebound. Then she got a boyfriend, and then by the time she was about 22, she got pregnant, and of course, was it because she'd missed a pill or something like that?
Mhm.
Felt great the minute she was off the pill and was pregnant, and all that estrogen was back in her body, pulsing through it. All those that big dose of hormones was back. Um, and then a good few, like 10 years later, she went back on the pill again. And her husband said to her, "You are not the person you were. There's something really wrong. You're really anxious. This is awful. Go off the pill and I'll get a vasectomy." And she came off the pill and she realized that was not who she was. And she'd gone from being housebound to starting a cleaning business, when she'd come off the pill. So you realize for some people, this just shuts down part of their brain. It shuts down their serotonin receptors. And obviously, that's not the case for everyone. And I'll just move quickly into Jay Ashry Kulkarni, Professor Jay
Yes,
Ashry
yeah.
Kulkarni in Australia, who's done amazing research on hormones and mental health. And this is where it comes in that it's not all bad about the pill.
Mhm.
Whereas she took one of the pills, which in Britain is called Zoeli, and it's got a body identical estrogen in it. So it's got a safer estrogen. It's still got the old progestin, but it's not so bad. It's like a step up from the original pill from 60 years ago. And she gave it to women who were having incredible ups and downs in the second half of the month and had PMDD, really serious depression in the last couple of weeks of the month. And for about, I think, 50-60% of them, it really, really steadied them, and it got them through the second half of the month, and not having the hormones leap up and down, but having a steady flow of this fairly decent estrogen kept them really, their mental health in a much better state. So, swings and roundabouts, there are reasons that you might want to use it, but what we need is to tell people these things. And this is the things that you and I are talking about here are not part of the general conversation. And we really, really want women to understand not all pills are the same, not all women are the same. We all have different hormones. And of course, we know that, but that's
Mhm.
not how the machine uses us. We are just sort of pumped through the machine with the same prescription.
Yeah. And it actually reminds me of this story. I interviewed a young woman who, when she was 16, her parental figure found out she was sexually active, took her to the doctors, and it was a case of, you're going on the Mirena coil. There was no conversation around it. It was very
Mhm.
much tell, not explain. And she ended up having a really traumatic experience, and it's left her with a lot of anxiety around getting it out, possibly getting another coil. And it makes you think, like, how many people's experiences, just because they don't have the right information, just because they don't have that power, they're
Mm.
being turned away from different methods that could possibly be amazing and really, really benefit them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, no,
it's
I think that, and I mean, one of the things about the coils, which I'm really interested in right now, is that the smaller coils, the Kylena and the JS,
yeah.
which are smaller size, so they're better for younger women. A younger woman like her, she should have not been offered the Mirena, but the smaller coil, lower dose of hormones. And again, our friends in Scandinavia done the studies, and have found that the lower the dose in the hormones in the coil, the less likely you are to have any kind of depression or anxiety in reaction. And a lot of people think, oh, the coil's in a different part of your body, it won't affect your brain. It will. It doesn't obviously always do that. I mean, for instance, Molly went from the pill to the coil. It had the same ingredient in it, but she's really, really happy on the coil and it works fine for her. So obviously the hormones don't behave in quite the same way, but people can really have mental health, problems on the coil too. And on the other hand, it can be great, so it's really difficult. I mean, everything about all these answers is they're not quite good enough, are they? All the methods could be slightly better. And when I look at HRT, which is kind of wonderful in that I can take this much progesterone, double the amount of estrogen if I want, a little bit of testosterone, and I can make my own potion basically every day, which, my doctor and I have agreed, my NHS doctor and I have agreed that I need between 2 and 3 pumps a day of estrogen so I don't get hot flushes, and 2 pumps give me hot flushes and 3 don't. So, I've worked out exactly what my body requires and I'm giving it the same hormone it had, 10 years ago. And that there is not that choice for people on the pill seems so unfair because hormones are not that expensive because you can't patent them. The natural ones I'm talking about, they're really, really cheap. A big pharma doesn't really make much money out of them. So they're not really keen to experiment on them either. And also these synthetic ones are all out of patent as well, basically, so they can just sort of print them cheaply too. So there's no incentive to give us something better. And we should talk about male contraception advances
I mean,
later.
yeah, that was no, actually, that was my a question later on, but we may as well talk about it now. I mean, the amount of anger that my friends and I have when, like, a lot of people remember in 2016 that case of as soon as male contraception showed side effects of, I think it was high libido, low moods, things that a lot of women deal with every single day of their lives, it was removed. The trial was cancelled, and my question sort of is like, do you see do you see female hormonal contraception getting the same level of caution in the next couple of years that male contraception obviously gets, you know?
No, I don't think they'll bother doing anything. I think this is not going to come from above. It's not going to come from academic research. I mean, there should be more, and there are some great people, but no, it'll come from women up. And that is the only way things, just as the menopause movement came from women up, realizing what was going on and going in and asking for HRT, and a million more women went on HRT, not because the doctor suggested it, but because they realized what was going on and read up about it. And I think what is already happening out there in hormonal contraception world is that women are coming off the pill, and we know the numbers have gone down in the last 7, 8 years. Women are increasingly going to natural cycles, not great. For certainly for younger women, and more women are having abortions, particularly abortions at home when you can take the 2 pills and there isn't the trauma of going to a clinic and the hassle. So the abortion has become less difficult, but nonetheless incredibly painful in a number of hours and a trauma in itself. So if you can avoid that as much as possible as a form of contraception, that would be great. But I don't think, like, the information on the newer forms of pills, with the body identical estrogen, it's not being put out there. And I suppose it's not being put out there because they're slightly more expensive. But in terms of our mental health, they're not expensive. It's just not right. But the male contraception thing is bonkers because obviously there's a different standard because there is no risk to a man of getting pregnant, whereas our risks are compared to the risk of getting pregnant, dying, having a thrombosis, whatever. There are many risks in getting pregnant. So there is a danger in getting pregnant. And, so our side effects are compared to that danger, and they're considered to be small compared to the risk. Of course, for men, there is no danger. So anything at all, an itchy toenail or whatever it is, is a problem. And they need to change that regulation, that scientific regulation to say this is about a couple, this is about people making a decision together, and so it should be a shared risk. And they are not doing that, and they've never done that. But I did go to meet Dan Glastonbury, who's a lovely guy, and his wife Emily. And he was on the first trial in Manchester of the new contraceptive shoulder gel for men, called NES/T, Nest, I don't know, which is made of nesterone and testosterone. So basically, you start rubbing your shoulder gel on, and your sperm count goes from 40 million to 1 million. And they check that your sperm count is incredibly low. And then once they've done that check, after a couple of months, they go ahead, get on with it. And it has been really, really successful in terms of contraception, but also in terms of side effects, because the progestin in that gel is one of the best progestins around that they have barely started using for women. It's a new one, and it looks really good in terms of things like blood clotting and all sorts of other things as well. So they've had a really good ride in Edinburgh, in I think Manchester, a couple of places around Britain and internationally with this. But it's another 5 years until we get permission or whatever. And you just think, oh, get it out there. We got the pill after about 2 days, in the 60s. And these ingredients have been tested. We know what nesterone is, we know what the progestin is, we know what testosterone is. It's not as if we're putting something from outer space on people, but yet we may have to wait, more time. And I just think we really, really need it now. And no, you can forward think about, a COVID vaccination and have it out in 20 minutes, but you can't forward think about male contraception. And it has only been 65 years since we got the pill.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned about COVID, because one of the sort of statistics in the book that I found completely mad was in terms of risks for contraception. I think it was the AstraZeneca
Yeah.
vaccine. Blood clot risk is 1 in 250,000.
Hmm.
Removed from shelves, countries banned it.
Yeah.
But when you look at the pill, the rate is 12 in 10,000, which
But when
is,
you think about what 12 and 10,000 means, it means like 1 in 1,000, doesn't it? When you
yeah,
when you do your little bit of arithmetic.
yes,
And I
it's
think
true.
that is a massive likelihood of getting clots, particularly as you get older. And actually last week I did a thing on stage with a woman who's 32 who was taking Yasmin, which is also called Eluine here.
Mhm.
And it's got what's it got? It's got anyway. Yasmin has Yasmin, Yaz, and Eloine, which is the generic version, have the worst record for clots of all the pills, and that is kind of proven. And there have been 19,000 legal suits in America worth over 400 million by women who've had clots while using Yasmin. Incredibly young women, women in their 20s. And the idea that we are giving this thing out still, and that it's one of the most popular pills because it's really great for acne, because it's anti-androgenic. And, you hardly ever see young women with spots anymore, but they might be well sort of in line for a clot. And I think, God, really, 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 what are we doing, medicating kids who are probably not even having sex yet,
Mhm.
with these risky pills for their skin. And, there must be better things for their skin than that. And it makes me so angry, the clot risk. And the clot risk comes back to the very days when, the pill was tested on 256 Puerto Rican women in 1956, in a kind of absolutely unethical trial, and people weren't told what they were on, and the doses were 10 times. This is the birth of the pill, tested on Black women, colonial style by American scientists. I mean, just everything about it absolutely stinks. But when you look at the science of it, that stinks too, which is that of those 256 women, three died pretty quickly of, we don't know. What could it be? Clots. It must have been clots, because that's what that was the problem. 25% came off the pill after a couple of months because they felt dizzy and sick, precursors to clots, feeling dizzy and sick.
Yeah.
So these women died for our sins, kind of thing.
Yeah.
They died so that we would get the pill. And obviously, we got it eventually in lower doses with less
Mhm.
risk. But that cavalier attitude to women just getting clots or collapsing, and young women, and these were young mums, and it's a really dirty history. It is quite shaming,
Yeah.
the history of the pill. And I wish more people knew that and understood it.
Yeah. And it's also like even more heartbreaking when you think about like the increased risk that Black women have to clots, like like all these different things. Like we're
Mm,
not doing enough investigation where it matters. It's in areas that I don't know. Do we really need like 15 different male contraception things when we should be researching a pill that has been about for 65 years or what have you?
yeah.
Like, yeah, it does make you angry. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you can't help but sort of have a moment.
Yeah,
Um,
and we put up with it so much. We just
yeah.
go, well, I found it a bit tough. It was hard, or I've changed my pill twice, and when we did that big poll, we did a Savanta poll, very professional poll of 4,000 women, for the Pill Revolution documentary, and we got Channel 4 to pay for it because I couldn't find the evidence to prove what I was hearing from women. So
Mhm.
we actually needed data to make sense of what we were about to tell people on television because the medical establishment had not gone and got that data. And obviously, I know a poll of 4,000 women isn't precise scientific information, but it is our lived experience. And it really matters. And it was a diverse poll, and it included 16 non-binary people as well who agreed to do it. So it was pretty good. And when we looked at that, 77% said we get side effects on the pill. And some of us are, or hormonal contraception, actually. And then 36% said they'd come off the pill at some point, or indeed hormonal contraception, because of mental health reasons. And, a whole bunch more were worried about weight gain. And then 21% said it lowered my libido when I went on the pill. And that you can actually join the science together to absolutely prove that one, because basically the hormones, the synthetic hormones in the pill lower your sex hormone binding globulin.
Mhm.
And when that, sorry, they increase your sex hormone binding globulin, which then prevents your free testosterone going around your body. And your free testosterone is your libido, it's your oomph, it's your drive, it can be sort of intellectual as well. And when that crashes, you might not be attracted to the person you went on the pill to have sex with, which is a piece of sort of extreme madness, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the idea that we don't talk about that, and I looked in one of the contraception textbooks, I looked for libido and mention of this, and I think there was one line. I was thinking, well, wait a minute, a fifth of women have a lowered sex drive on the pill, and it merits one line in your textbook. Because what, that doesn't matter? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean even when you look at like medical misogyny as a like a broad ranging subject that comes up time and time again. Women's sexual health is never prioritized over reproductive and things like that. Like it just doesn't. Yeah.
But it's not just our sexual health, because so many women are going on the pill. Half of them go on the pill to
Mhm.
regulate their periods, right? That's
Yeah.
so people aren't just going on to have sex. That's
Yeah.
sometimes a sideline. So it's about menstrual regulation and, also dealing with contraception as well. And I mean, when you think about women with endometriosis and the fact that the progestin only pill is anti-inflammatory. It can lower those estrogen flare-ups that make endometriosis go crazy all over the body. And they can really, it's not perfect for everyone, but it can really save a woman from, years and years of hell.
Mm.
Not for everybody, because endometriosis is a nightmare, but for quite a few, it makes life livable.
Yeah.
And, that pain doesn't come in the same way. And that's kind of incredibly important to kind of understand that. And again, polycystic ovarian syndrome, you know, those nice high estrogen pills I was talking about with the natural estrogen in them,
Mhm.
very good for that. Really help to balance up the high testosterone that a lot of people with PCOS have, gets the cycle running. You know, that they really are important for all sorts of other things.
Mhm.
And you know, and just giant agonizing periods, you know. And you know, if you've got the kind of job that involves, you know, if you're a sportswoman, or what if you work on the Amazon, you know, fulfillment line and you have the most enormous periods, and you know, you take 5, 10 minutes off the Amazon fulfillment line, it gets ticked off in, you know, a little computer saying took too long a break, you know, and you're just flooding. And the idea that, you know, you might have a tsunami period and you might not want to have it so that you can live your life and do your job. You
Mhm.
know, we put up with a lot, I
Yeah.
think.
I
Yeah.
mean that reminds me of the Pope rule, which I don't know if you want to explain it, but I've explained this to some male friends of mine, and they were like, "What?" It was, and female friends as well, and like non-binary friends, like so many people are shocked by this, and isn't it? I mean, if you would explain it, that would be great. But in your Pill Revolution survey, 48% of people didn't know this fact. So yeah,
Yeah.
if you wanna go ahead
Yeah.
and
Well, basically, you don't need to take a break in the pill to have a fake period, a fake bleed, because it's not a real bleed unless you want to.
Mhm.
And some people do like a week off the hormones, and I totally get that. But for most people, it's a kind of stupid inconvenience and a total waste of Tampax and time and all these kind of things. And it was because the two scientists behind the pill wanted the Catholic Church to approve the pill as a natural method of contraception. And the only way they hoped to convince the Pope that it was natural was that you still had your periods. It wasn't stopping you. It was just a way of kind of regulating it a bit. And so they kept that in, and they realized while they were doing the first trials in the pill that there was no reason to have a pill break whatsoever. Um, and, you know, it's just think about all those women, all that misery, all that blood, you know, all those flooded beds. You know what it's like at night, and you wake up and you go,
So
someone's
many sheets.
and when you think about it, oh God, we didn't have to go through that. Nobody told us. And it retrospectively makes me angry, that one. But also that women kind of go, oh, I don't think I should do that. Oh, I'm not sure. Because we've just been so indoctrinated that we really have to have bleed. And we don't. I mean, you know, it's fine if you want to, but not if you don't want to. Don't put yourself through it unless you need to, you know. Have the freedom.
Exactly. No, exactly. I mean, um, that brings me on. I mean, it's been a while since everything you need to know about the pill and everything you need to know about menopause have come out. And since then, I'm sure you've spoken to so many more people about hormones and their journey. Is there something that you found out since they've been published that has
Yeah.
sort of shocked you as well?
I've got two two things I became slightly obsessed with afterwards because the knowledge keeps coming and the information keeps, you know, it just keeps coming. You could go on doing this forever and ever and ever. The big thing that really worried me after I'd written the pill book, and I said, you know, Depo-Provera injection, the contraceptive injection, which has medroxyprogesterone acetate, as nasty as it sounds, in it. And that's the one that they actually admit can make you put on like about 4 kilograms or whatever, or 4 pounds. I can't remember which, but it can really make you put on weight. And it's the injection is also a year. It takes a year to get your fertility back after using the injection. So everything about that is not great. And then you realize also it's got a risk for osteoporosis. It lowers your bone density. And then there was something about people getting little brain tumors on the injection. And there's an article came out recently. And just when you put all those things together, the osteoporosis, the brain tumors, the weight, and this medroxyprogesterone acetate, that was the terrible progestin that was used in the first trials of HRT that came out in 2002 and were shown to have an increased rate of breast cancer for women. Admittedly, there were a bunch of much older women, and there was a whole lot
Mhm.
of rubbish going on in that trial. Nonetheless, it is not a good progestin, and we are still injecting people. And the people we're injecting might be people, who are struggling, who are on the streets, who, their mothers are saying they must have contraception. Do you know what I mean? They may
Yeah.
not be making a decision with that full knowledge of the risks. I bet you they are not. I don't think anyone is. I don't think anyone knows the full knowledge. And I think the contraceptive injection, which was historically used, of course, in, Africa,
Yeah.
by aid agencies and things like that. You just think it was just stuffed into women, and, as a solution. And I think so that's one of the things I think Depo-Provera and the other contraceptive injections are a really questionable form of contraception we should avoid using. And I don't say that about any of the other stuff really, but I just don't think it really. I also put it up on my Instagram, and I immediately got stories of and dozens of women. And of course, the problem with the injection is that once it's in there, it's going to be in there for a good few months.
Wow.
So you can't stop it like the pill. It's there, it's in your body. It is releasing itself over time, and that is really scary. So that, I suppose that was the one thing. And also I became interested in osteoporosis in menopause, and in my next book, which is coming out in the summer, which is called How to Have a Magnificent Midlife Crisis. Chapter on osteoporosis. It's actually got a chapter on how not to get osteoporosis. And after doing all this menopause study, I realized that 1 in 2 women get an osteoporotic break after the age of 50. And you all know your granny on a Zimmer frame, or someone with a bent back, or someone who falls over and breaks their wrist in 7 places, and they go, why? And that is all osteoporosis because of low hormones. And hormones make bones. Hormones operate the bone turnover. Our bones are like branches in our body, and they need hormones and calcium all the time to be turning over. And when we don't get that in menopause, our bones get brittle and they break. And then I got a grant, actually. I mean, thank God, because it's very hard to do all this journalism for almost nothing,
Yeah.
And I got a grant from Henpicked to investigate this, and I went through all the science papers and saw how much does HRT increase your bone density, if you start taking it after the age of 50. And it was increasing either by 7% over 2 years, or 13% in the spine over 10 years. So basically, we can rebuild our bones or keep them running at the same level if we take HRT, particularly the good stuff. And if you don't take HRT, you lose 6% of your bone density in perimenopause, before you're 50, and you can lose 10 to 20% of your bone density from menopause on. I was like, so why, NHS, have we not told women this? Anything about, why, when people go in and break a bone and they're in their 50s and 60s, the doctor's not saying, you should go on HRT, it'll build your bones back up. Maybe it'll take you out of being in the kind of osteoporosis bracket, and your bones will be nice and rubbery again. They won't be all stiff. It keeps them kind of flexible. It keeps your joints flexible. It keeps your muscles growing. And I realized that actually, in terms of cost, it costs the NHS 4.6 billion a year to treat osteoporosis. I thought, oh, wow. They don't need to do that mostly, because we could just all keep our bones going nice and strong. And weightlifting is very good too for that, but not as good as having your hormones back. And so we ran a campaign on that. And that's basically what I've done, a campaign called Give Your Bones a Break, obviously. We went and had talked to a parliamentary committee about it last week, and we're hoping to meet Wes Streeting, mind you, so is everyone else. But the economic argument is so astounding, and the argument around the humanity of not letting women end up staggering around on sticks is kind of it. Again, it's extraordinary that why. I mean, I'm asking you, because you've done lots of research. Why is no one listening? Why is only a limited number of people listening? Why isn't the NHS going, this is fantastic, let's get it out there? I don't know.
It's shocking, because it's funny you brought up West Street, because actually one of the articles for this project, I've just written it about the economic benefits of investing in a woman's health. And when you look at the numbers, they would make bank if they would just begin listening to women. Like it must just be not just decades, hundreds of years of just built-in ignorance around this. Like
Mm,
there's no other reason for it, because if they just took the time and actually listened, instead of promising you're gonna help women set up health hubs, do all these
mm,
things, and then pull the rug underneath them,
mm.
it doesn't make sense. I'm with you. I'm flabbergasted, and I think anyone that researches or talks about this subject or just experiences it are just as confused. So yes,
Yeah.
both
I,
baffling.
I think we need to probably be talking to the NHS economists, and I don't know who they
Yeah.
are. Because it's not like the arguments that it's not like I'm making a radical argument around osteoporosis. It's in the NHS website, ways of treating osteoporosis, paragraph 10 kind of thing. HRT can help your bone density. So it's not like we're coming up with some crazy idea. We're just saying this is the top idea. It shouldn't be down at the bottom of your list. And also we got this grant. I worked with a fantastic bone surgeon called Dr. Bill Robertson Smith, who's a woman. And she'd just seen old women coming in, falling apart, and having to kind of staple them together, basically. And she's very, very strong feelings about it. And she sent out an inquiry, a freedom of information request to every fracture liaison service that was up in the UK, in England and Wales, actually. And fracture liaison services, you break your bone, you go in, they tell you what to do, they give you aftercare, and they say, here are the drugs, here's what you should do. So basically, they sort it out. And of over 350,000 women who'd gone to the fracture liaison service over 50, only 169 had been offered HRT as a solution. So out of 350,000, and at least 100,000 of those, right, would be in a great bracket to start HRT. So basically, no one cared and no one knew. And you just thought, and you sometimes need, again, you need the data. And there
Mhm.
was the data that showed absolutely that no one knew at all that HRT had these magical powers and was really good for women. And there's the same sort of story going on with Alzheimer's, which I'm really
Mhm.
interested in. I also talk about in my book.
Mhm.
But when your estrogen goes in your brain, you're more at risk of Alzheimer's. Don't let anyone tell you any different. And you can't necessarily ride through it, particularly if you've got the APOE4 gene. I'm a daughter of Alzheimer's. Um,
Mhm.
Dumb, absolutely dumb not to take estrogen if you can, you know?
Yeah, that's actually I'm excited to read like your next book now, because I'm a granddaughter of Alzheimer's.
Oh, I'm
It's
sorry.
so no, listen, I think it's far more common than people think, and yeah, it's so important. And I also think like when people it's really changed in the last couple of years thanks to the Channel 4 documentary, but I think menopause in particular, young women are starting to find out about it more, and I think it's so important because you can go into perimenopause at age 20. Like it doesn't matter what age you are, we should be finding out and learning
Mhm.
about it. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. But what I bringing it back slightly to the pill, I just wanted to ask, I know many people might be listening to this, might be engaging with information about the pill and sort of waking up to these risks that we've been talking
Mm.
about. For you, what advice would you give somebody if they're sort of thinking about changing their pill or coming off of it completely?
Well, there are two things. I think that if you go on like your NHS website or indeed TikTok, you can get some very, very wacky opinions on this. What you actually need to do is there's a good website called Hormonally now,
Hmm.
which is very good on things like endometriosis and things like that in the pill, worth looking at. And also the Lowdown has very, very good. It's a commercial website which also sells pills and things like that, but it has very good advisors and very good advice on the different kinds of pills. And it's like a trip advisor for the pill. And that is really good. So, I'd first ask yourself questions like, what was I like before I was on the pill? Or, have a journal. So you journal when you're going on the pill. And they always say, oh, see how it goes over 3 months. If it's terrible, stop it at 3 weeks or 2 weeks, or you know what I mean? If you have a terrible reaction, maybe you don't need to struggle through. Maybe that's not the pill for you. So I would definitely take note. I'd research seriously. I'd ask your friends. I'd take notes. I'd journal it as I went along. You don't have to journal it necessarily, but you can put your symptoms into one of those apps like Clue every day and just go in foul mood, in foul mood, in foul mood, or whatever it is. And I think that's really worth it. And it's really worth looking at, alternatives. I mean, could you do natural cycles and condoms? And you'd have to do the condoms in a very serious way. But on the other hand, if you love that creative estrogen peak and you want to have that kind of natural feeling with your hormones and maybe get to know your body and see what it's like, then, can you take that decision, and can you and your partner, it's difficult if you're not in a kind of partnered relationship, but can you and your partner use a condom? And actually, if you're not in a partnered relationship, you should be using a condom anyway. So, but there is that option, of all those different things. And I also think we should be asking, really good people like Brooke or whoever to go into schools more to tell 14-year-olds, 13-year-olds exactly what the pill can do in terms of menstrual regulation, what the choices are, what the safety risks are. Treat them like grown-ups because their bodies are grown up. Girls are having periods at 11 or 12.
Yeah.
So, we can't just sit there and go, oh, let's wait till they're older. They're dealing with, really heavy periods at age 12.
Yeah.
So we've got to think completely differently as mums, as teachers, as people who care about looking after really, really young women and giving them really good advice and giving them better products, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, we could talk about this literally forever. So I'm gonna try and wrap up and just ask you a question that I'm gonna ask some of the other guests in this series, and it's quite broad, so don't be stressed out if you can't think of anything straight away, but I'm sure you will. It's just basically if you had a magic wand and you could change something about the healthcare system tomorrow, what is the one thing that you think needs to change right now?
You know what? I'd like an economist, a data cruncher, a women in data cruncher to go in and crunch all the data and prove everything to everyone. And I think that would make a huge difference within our system. So I'd like to do that. I would also like, just secondly, if I can have a second choice, I would like people to stop cutting up frogs in school, age 14, and be taught properly, boys, girls, non-binary kids, about menstruation, about endometriosis, about PCOS, about pregnancy, about postnatal depression, and about menopause. And I think it should be a module on women's health that boys do too. Really, really serious, brilliant, funny, clever module. That is what we need now. And they can do it tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, I'll get on to the Wempower team. I'm sure that we'll get on that right away. But yeah. No, this has been great. For anyone that wants to find out more, where can they find you? What is there any word about when the new book's out? Oh, go on.
So I have two Instagrams, Meno Scandal for the menopause and Pill Scandal for the pill. I'm mostly on Meno Scandal because that's my kind of age group. And my next book is going to be for midlife women. So it's How to Have a Magnificent Midlife Crisis. And that is out in June from Simon & Schuster. So, and it has a couple of radical chapters on women's health, as you'd expect.
Thanks for listening to the Wempower podcast. To find out more, visit our website wempower.co or follow us on socials at Wempower UK on Instagram and TikTok, Wempower on Facebook, and Wempower UK again on LinkedIn.